features of solitary thinking, or indeed philosophical thinking. And it's obvious that it waxes and wanes. There's a movement between the two, and it's the movement between politics and philosophy. It's hardly a strict division. The one becomes the other, and the other becomes the one, and in fact, on the condition of one another. So she actually answers her own question here about whether there is a kind of strict solitude that is separable from plurality, multiplicity, the political sphere, or whether the life of action or politics is fully separable from solitude. It's a kind of corrective to the strong distinction she makes between philosophy and politics in the interview, and the strong distinction she sometimes makes between philosophy and politics in the writing. I don't know if that answers you, but it seems to me that we have to actually see these as dynamic, as moving into one another, as a kind of temporal transition between the two.
Vincent, did you want to say something?
Yes, maybe I can introduce another question concerning the movement, but this is the movement back and forth between the Arendt text and the Heidegger text. And as Mary pointed out earlier, this also especially really struck me when she's talking about the Socratic morality as some kind of emergency measure. And I'm pretty sure that there's a mass now that is being translated here. And when relating to emergency, this got me thinking about what is happening in the Heidegger text when he's talking about the wasteland grows, the text. And a little bit later, he describes here, I'm sorry, I'm quoting in German because the relation, I think, is in German. Das Drohne diese Verkehrung gehört zu dem, was uns zu denken gibt. So you have the Maßnahme, and here this must, this mass, already resounding in it, and this giving and taking that's in some way related to an emergency or a wasteland or a disaster situation that is going on. This is an open question on is there a possible interpretation that connects these?
What I bring home and call home from your question is something that concerns us all in the practice of what we're doing, and also an implicit anxiety that she seems to articulate, and that we always face as an at least implicit accusation, which is concerning the urgency and the emergency supplies of meaning, or the supplement of morality. And I too was stuck for a moment. I'm not saying you were, but I was, when her ambivalence towards Socrates, which I was wondering, is it a cover-up? Because I'm reading with night goggles on, and all my shit detectors are on, and she gives us this emergency assignment. We're working all night on it, Yeah. So I too was wondering, is she saying something that can be more safely addressed to Socrates, or organized around the Socratic figuration here, than to Martin Heidegger? Because she even says in another moment, well, maybe Socrates wasn't such a great philosopher. Da, 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 da. That really, for me, was very, very, wait a minute. But, and here again is a kind of quasi-thematics of dependency. Like, the gods are gone, figures of responsibility with some transcendental backup or guarantee are gone. One of the quasi-thematics is, whom can we rely on? Whom can we depend on? Okay, I'm going to split and consolidate in the 2 for 1. I'm doing this. I'm on my own here, but my own is already always dispossessed, as I think you pointed out, and already expropriated, and there are population surges and drains and so on. And Larry pointed out that that there's a lot of room for all sorts of phantom and spectral conversations going on in the 2-for-1 already. But the emergency and the urgency is something that, you know, if we can roll back momentarily to her other essay on authority, and this, I think, comes through also in the woundedness that seems to seep and leak and smear through on some of her more self-possessed moments. Again, how do you read the eyelashes and the blowing the smoke out? You know, is it defensive? Is it, you know, her fabulousness? Or
It's a little bit Davis liked it.
yeah, and okay. The emergency and urgency. So in the rollback that I proposed, which will take a nanosecond, is what happened to Plato when Socrates was murdered by the state, she says, and the state showed its hostility. I was going to say hospitality. Yeah, it's like taking you out for a ride. Yeah.
Come on in.
Kiss on the lips and all of that from my neighborhood, you know? So the state showed its hostile hand. It was armed, and it slaughtered Plato's partner and mentor and beloved teacher and so on. And that's when Plato is thinking, we're in trouble here, and we're going to have to somehow play this and invent authority, as I said. But nonetheless, there's this wound that, in a sense, only Kant affirms, but that the state is out to get us. Doesn't give, not only, it's even too nice to say it doesn't give a shit about what philosophers think. And when they think, who let out Heidegger, you know? That was calamitous. So neither the rhetoric of persuasion worked to save Socrates, it comes up a little here as well, nor are the philosophical troops and tropes armed to protect themselves. So there's a sense also that on the one hand, where Kant said we have to shoot blanks. It doesn't matter if no one's listening or if our blanks don't hit targets and blow up things. We still have to shoot them and mouth off and stand up in front of the monolith and monstrosity of the hostile state. And this was going somewhere else. Okay, so the emergency. So somehow there's a question of urgency that is also, she has a silent thematics almost of impotence, which runs through a lot of her texts. And also, I think, a real grave disappointment. And so maybe it's an enactment of some melancholia, too. Lost. And Freud opens up that dossier on mourning and melancholia by saying it's not restricted to people or persons, but it could be the loss of a country. A loss of an ideal.
Fatherland.
And this is, you know, when you were talking about idealization and loss and so on. So there's something that you could only call on Socrates when there's an emergency. And emergency, urgency, this is something that would open up days of discussion, because one is defanged as a philosophical, psychoanalytic, perhaps, entity. At the same time, there's all sorts of, we're ignoring with her the positing power of language, the violence of speech and transferential turbulence. She's not allowing for that. She does seem pretty alone in some of these texts. I don't know, does she open up to transference and the way that people have hung their hopes and love on her?